Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Songs of Healing podcast with Ian Taylor, a podcast where we explore the healing elements of song and songwriting and how they are used to heal and process life experiences. I am your host, Ian Taylor, singer-songwriter, coach, and humble student of life, offering my perspectives, wisdom, heartfelt honesty, and story. So we're on the 10th episode of this podcast, and I'm realizing that I should start probably announcing my shows and what's happening with my music before diving into the song and the whole dialogue of the podcast. So on May 11th, I have a show at the Mint for anybody who's listening. I am playing around 8 p.m. at the Mint here in Los Angeles. That's going to be fun. And I'll try to post a link to my 2 tickets or whatnot. And then on May 18th, I also have another show playing at a showcase in Santa Monica at the Unurban Cafe on Pico Boulevard. And that'll be another fun show. No tickets for that one. It's a free show. It's a part of a singer-songwriter showcase, friends of mine. And I've also released The Great Unknown, which I'm sure many of you know, considering I just released a podcast episode on The Great Unknown. And that's streaming on Spotify, and you can go to Ian Taylor and stream it. Ian Taylor, The Great Unknown. You can also stream my other single release, It's Just a Heartache. And I'm gearing up to release another single soon, and this one's going to be fun. It's called Old Sadness, and it's a beautiful song. I've been enjoying working on it. So those are the announcements coming forward, coming down the pipe. I've also been in the studio recording some acoustic songs with a really cool sound engineer. So that's going to be fun. I'm excited to share that with everybody. All right, so we'll get right into this one. This song is called Only If You Wanted Me, and it was a song that was on my first full-length album that I recorded by myself with all of my equipment that I accumulated through the years and through being in that electronic rock project outfit that I was in, learning all about gadgets and how to use them all, how to record myself. And so this song or this album was released at a time in my life. I believe I recorded it around 2014-15. There was a lot transitioning for me at this point in my life. I was working at this coffee shop, Phil's Coffee, up in Berkeley, and I was at the same time attending this counseling program that I talked a little bit about in a past podcast episode, and I was also going to men's groups. So this time in my life, I just realized that I was unhappy at the coffee shop. I was surrounded by a lot of younger people. I'm still surrounded by a lot of younger people in my life, but at the time, I was specifically having a hard time feeling a sense of community among these younger people, and I was just feeling burned out with working at a coffee shop. So this time in my life, I decided to go into working full-time in the marijuana industry. At this point in my life, pretty much since I moved to California, I had been working seasonally in the marijuana industry. And at this time in my life, I decided to go full into it because I could, because I had knew enough people up there at this point. I'd been working in the industry for a long time, but seasonally, meaning just only like a month or two out of the year, and then coming back home to pursue music and work at restaurant gigs, whatnot, while I was, playing in bands, playing in my band, and going out and performing, meeting people in the Bay Area. So at this point, yeah, I went full time mostly because I could spend a lot of my time focusing on music, because it was basically like a gig based job. It was like go and work for a couple months or a month, come back home with a little bit of money to chill on for a bit and focus on my music. So it was kind of like a new lifestyle for me at the time. And I also, at this time, I remember in men's groups at that time and just kind of talking about like, I'm wanting to go more into music in my life, and I'm not sure exactly how to do that professionally. And, I had just done this counseling program, which was it was a cool program. It was a hard program for me too. It was beautiful. I learned a lot of really beautiful skills in counseling. But later I'll get more into why it was a challenging program for me as well. It was just relationally a challenging experience. But I just got a new van, so the intention was to kind of get a camper van, live-in van to truck around the West Coast, just playing music, playing at open mics, playing where I could, making more friends, making more connections. Because, throughout a lot of my adult life, I just had this dream of, I moved here into a pretty alternative culture, new age, kind of like hippie culture, very alternative, especially in the marijuana industry. It was a lot of like people who were of alternative mindset, determined to live outside of the mainstream in this kind of like underground world. And so the intention for me was to get a van to kind of travel around, play music up and down the West Coast, and to work when I needed to. And but mostly just to be able to focus on music and have fun. And so, I remember talking with my men's groups about this. They knew how unhappy I was at this coffee shop, and they supported me in kind of venturing out and discovering myself on a different level. So that's kind of where I was at. That's where my mindset was at this time before I wrote this album, leading into writing this album. And to get back to the song is called "Only If You Wanted Me." It's a grieving song. It's a kind of a breakup song. Not really breakup song. It's kind of like a forlorn, yearning song. This whole album was actually a pretty big grief catharsis album. And it stemmed from meeting this girl at one of these trim scenes, these where I would go work. And let's actually listen to the song, and then I'll get more into the story behind it that kind of led me to write this song. I hope you guys enjoy it. bad dream. You were there with a hook in my heart, and your tugging schemes head ablaze from drinking too much and the pain that I can't bear. Lie in bed, the feel of the blankets remind me when you were there. A yearning hand reaches for my phone, hoping for some gesture, but you're not there. You're a ghost in my home that loves to pester with memories of a time when you would curl up with me. And I wonder where you could be. All day long, baby, all day long, everything seems to whisper a painful song. I get stuck in your mystery. What the fuck is up with you, and what did it mean to have you so close next to me, only to grab for something that could never be? I fall so hard for a fantasy, hoping and praying for it to be reality. Only if you wanted me. In a dance, I took my heart out for you to see, but you held your stance. You looked at the thing with no intrigue, 'cause my hope keeps smashing my heart against cold stone, and I can't cope. It takes everything in me to keep from picking up the phone. After all, I saw your broken heart in a hotel room. That's what had me fall. That's why I kissed your chest and cared for your wound. To no avail, the wound is too deep, you just can't be free. You protect yourself with apathy, and all day long, baby, all day long, everything seems to whisper a painful song. I get stuck in your mystery. What the fuck is up with you, and what did it mean to have you so close next to me, only to grab for something that could never be? I fall so hard for a fantasy, hoping and praying for it to be reality. Only if you wanted me. Only if you wanted me. Only if you wanted me. So that song, it really brings me back to the space I was in when I recorded the song. It was the summer, and a friend of mine that I had met, it was this woman that had played violin for me at a EP release show. the EP before this album, or before I recorded this album, and she was living up in Willits, California, in this cabin, and she was going to be out of town, and she invited me to come stay there, and the intention was for me to record an album. And so this song really was like me alone in this cabin in the middle of the mountains in Willits, California, just kind of going through my grief, and just really also was really, the intention was to go there and really just capture the raw emotion that I was going through at that time. It's kind of when everything changed for me from, the last EP was more electronic, acoustic electronic, and it was kind of like the last artistic expression I did around acoustic electronic stuff since my band, The Height, had broken up. And I just really wanted to go deep into this raw emotion, this simplified acoustic, just me and my voice. And this song just really reminds me of that time emotionally, all that I was going through. I was like simultaneously going through this deep grieving process around this girl that I'd met, and was recording and writing these songs, and kind of like really in love with these recordings that I was doing, and simultaneously like feeling the real ache and pain of grief that was going into these songs, and the real sense of deep loneliness and deep isolation. And it was just such a raw time for me. Going back a little bit, I'll go into a little bit of a story of what led me up to that point. So, kind of backtracking to, I had got this van and had left this job at this coffee shop and was ready to I was still living in the Bay. Luckily, I was living in this studio where my rent was really cheap. And so I could afford to kind of just keep the spot, pay rent while I was off kind of traveling around. And I had just come off of this kind of trying experience in this counseling program that I was participating in, where, the program I had mentioned in an earlier episode that the program had, it was a really beautiful program, a lot of really beautiful methods in counseling. It's where I really learned how to sit with another and hold emotional space for them, be present, and try to work with them. And, it was a very open community. Like I said, underground, kind of like polyamory community, people into open relationships. It was like the whole San Francisco scene, so there was, looking back now through my experiences around knowing what healthy relationship is, or looking back, it was a bit of a boundaryless community, meaning because everybody was so open and affectionate with each other and expressive and honest with each other, it was kind of like, and I've actually experienced this in a lot of like new age kind of more alternative hippie cultures, where peace and love is kind of like the 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 tenet, I guess that's the right word, of the community, where it impresses upon how openness to love and to connection and to affection is prioritized over being closed, over being maybe more protective. And so this, in those environments, in those communities, there's always a sense of like, if you are one that is uncomfortable with hugging someone, even if you don't know them or if you don't feel close to them yet, that's weird for the other people in the community, but it's like an unspoken thing, it's challenging to feel if you don't lean towards heavy affection with a lot of people. It can be challenging in those communities in feeling accepted and a part of it. I always hung out in them, since moving to California. And it took me a while to learn that there's a certain boundarylessness in relationships that ultimately feel damaging and unsafe to me. And honestly, a part of this whole experience for me going into writing this song was kind of, I think, happening for me at the base level of my life, learning this stuff around boundaries, around not giving too much of my energy away for someone that, or just not giving too much of my energy away past what feels comfortable for me. That's really it. So anyways, in this community, I had started dating this woman who was actually a leader and a teacher in this program. And I definitely was in a dynamic of putting her on a pedestal. I had just kind of come out of that 8-year relationship with my girlfriend throughout my 20s. And this was kind of like the first, not really the first relationship, but it was kind of like the first woman that I was like, oh, I would want to be with her, rather than just date and have fun with. So it was a confusing experience for me because there was a power dynamic in the relationship. And she was a couple years older than me, and she was also, there was a lot of challenge in our relationship. There was an experience of me feeling constantly criticized and not good enough. And so having that kind of hardship happen simultaneously with this community that I was learning counseling in, this program, it was just challenging. It was a challenging experience for me. I had to learn how to draw boundaries with this person because there was a lot of ways where it felt like they were unhealthy in their own boundaries with letting themselves kind of go into a relationship with me, even though it was actually kind of against the policy there. So I'd just been kind of coming out of this like strange dynamic with this woman, and was in this, and was very aware that I did not feel powerful in that relationship. And I've always, humbly, I admit that I've always struggled with confidence, and I've always struggled with feeling my own power in the world, and struggling with really low self-esteem just through my upbringing. And that was just really accentuated in this relationship. And so for me, at that time in my early 30s, I chose to leave that relationship with this older woman who was in power over me, and I felt small in that dynamic a lot. I chose to date women that were younger than me, just because I was just so turned off by this experience of feeling so disempowered in a relationship. And I kind of was craving a bit more of like a dynamic with someone where I could feel like strong, and I could feel like they adored me. And and at the same time, I was also coming out of that long relationship I was in. There was some things going on for me where I was wanting to date and have good fun experiences and kind of, feel my confidence again. And I was coming out of that long relationship, and I was wanting to explore what it was to date different types of women younger than me, women older than me. So I was just ready at this point, after going through this weird dynamic, to kind of have some like fun and have some like relationships that, where maybe there's good cheer rather than this heaviness, and that's kind of where my head was at in that time. And so I had just gotten this van. I was kind of like, just I had released this EP, and I was like ready to go kind of travel around, see what I could get into. And after spending this chunk of money on this van, I was like, the intention was to go make that money back and kind of bring myself back to balance. And so I went to work up in the mountains in the weed industry. And through that, I got a job at this one place where there was a group of, interesting kind of like alternative festival girls, train hopping punk kids at this trim scene. And I, I went there to work and was there for a good month or two, or maybe longer. And there was pretty girls there, and it was fun. It was actually a really fun experience. There was a lot of laughter. There was, at the time, I was partying more, so I was drinking more. Don't do that anymore. And I had stopped smoking weed like a long time ago, but I was kind of just like indulging just a little bit here and there, because not too much, because I started getting a lot of anxiety smoking weed. But anyways, and so I had stopped that a long time ago. But anyways, I was kind of like letting loose a little bit. It was kind of like I was like exploring. I was open, I was around all these really pretty girls and like really fun people, and there was this girl there, this Israeli girl who was younger than me, and I was really attracted to her. And and honestly, at that time too, before even going into this work situation, this scene, I was also going through a bout of deep loneliness after having a fling with this girl where we kind of went deep together, but she lived in another country and she had to leave, and I was missing her. And it kind of had unlocked some loneliness, but it was manageable for me in that moment. But yeah, then entering into this scene and meeting this girl, and I made it known to this girl that I was interested in her, and she had made it known to me that she was not interested in me. And so I had to deal with rejection. It wasn't my first time dealing with rejection. But I had, at this point in my life, I just had a lot more confidence, and I put myself out there with this girl. She wasn't interested, even though it was confusing for me, because I could feel that she was interested, that her energy was interested, but she was just holding me at arm's length. She was kind of holding me at bay, which I tried to roll with. And at the same time, my attachment anxiety and my nervous system really came on board with her. And I remember at that time the amount of energy and attraction that I would feel towards her, and like that I felt was going on between us, that she wasn't willing to speak into, was causing me to just feel incredibly anxious, to feel incredibly like not really low self-esteem, but just so much like energy that I had to move it. I remember just kind of being a little tormented being around her because the attraction was so strong. And it's probably that she rejected me that it also turned it on a bit more for me. So there was just, and I was kind of maintaining it. I was learning how to manage it inside of myself. And this was probably the first time that I'd ever really like learned how to deal with these kind of deep emotions. When it comes to attachment theory, I'm more of an anxiously attached person. That is, unless there's a different dynamic going on. Like I can also be an avoidant person, which is another attachment style. But this was probably the first time in my life that I actually really took the time to really like consider like the effect on me that women had on me, and it was confusing for me because I remember at that time I was feeling really infatuated with this girl, but I knew it was not someone that I would want to be with. It was not the type of person that I would want to be with. Like I knew she didn't fit the criteria of a healthy relationship for me. But I was very drawn to her, very drawn into her, and through my years of kind of doing work on myself and exploring myself, she definitely, what came forward for me was definitely like a fantasy attachment. It was definitely like it fell on the scale of sex and love addiction, probably, and a fantasy addiction. And at the same time, it was deep for me, man. I mean, it was going back to kind of a historical thing for me around women, originating from my relationship with my mother. So anyways, some survival kind of mechanisms came up for me in her kind of turning me down, I believe. And I believe I entered into a fawning kind of phase with this girl, because what was coming forward for me was like, well, I'm really attracted to her and the energy is really there, even if she's not admitting it. So for me, my pattern has been to kind of be very nice and act as a savior for women with my wisdom and with my deep intelligence of others and of life and of spirituality. And so I still held myself open for this girl, even though she rejected me, to kind of have a connection, but more on a kind of deep connective level, not like a romantic level, more like I guess you could say friends that share very deeply and that have affection for each other, even though I wouldn't have been able to define it like that at the time. And so circumstances happened in that situation to where she needed help with something. She had like lost her car, and I volunteered to drive her to the Bay Area to figure out her car situation. And we at that point had kind of developed enough of a relationship where we had good cheer, good friendship with each other. We enjoyed each other to where it's like we felt safe with each other, or she felt safe with me, and we went off together. And I brought her to my place, to my studio, and she stayed with me. And things did get a bit romantic between us. I brought her out to dinner a few times. There was a moment where where we could have slept together, but it wasn't feeling right for me, so I chose not to. More because I just wasn't. I knew that her attention to me and her affection to me was inconsistent, and I knew that I needed a lot more presence and a lot more consistency and a lot more assurance that she would stick around. She would still be intimate with me if we were going to go in that direction. So, weirdly enough, I turned her down in that realm of sexuality. And, but, we still traveled together. I still kind of had a lot of great feelings for her. We were kissing a little bit, but mostly the thing that really got me with her is that we slept together every night. Like, we slept in the same bed together every night. And I realized through that experience that maybe even more than sex, that creates deep attachment for me. Sharing a bed with somebody and cuddling with each other throughout the night. Sharing that kind of loving space together, that nurturance.
You're not there, you're a ghost in my home that loves to pester with memories of a time when you would curl up with me.
So at this point, we had gone to some hot springs and kind of had some relaxing time together after work. We went back to the bay, had these experiences, and then she was going to go up to Portland to get a car because there's no taxes in Oregon. And it was easier for her, being a foreigner, to get a car. And I decided to follow her up there, or I decided to drive her up there anyways. And yeah, it was at that point of time, I really felt myself fall really deep into her. I fell in love with her, even though I would not have been able to admit that at the time. But I remember driving up to Portland with her and kind of having these deep sensations of I would follow her anywhere. And, it really took me off track of what I thought I was going to be doing with going to play music and kind of traveling around to kind of see what I could do with my music and the EP I just released. And I remember driving with her and just kind of being like, I would drive across the country with her, I would just stay with her. This is just so nice to be in her presence and kind of feeling her joy and feeling our good cheer together and our chemistry and our energy, even though she didn't want to be with me, even though the whole time she was keeping me at arm's length. But we drove up to Portland, stopped at a hot springs on the way, or maybe a couple, can't remember exactly. And, we got into Portland. We went through some stuff together. We were pretty much in a relationship, She did have a mean streak, and I had a very nice streak. So that was the way that I kind of learned how to deal with that, was meet her with kindness. But she kind of treated me badly in retrospect, honestly. But I was hooked in. I had really, put myself aside to follow this girl around. Yeah. And then eventually she got that van, and then it was kind of coming to this moment where it was like, oh shit, we're gonna part, because she doesn't need me to cart her around anymore in my van. And so she bought this van, and then she was like, come to Seattle with me to go check out this national park or something like that. And I was like, okay. But at that point in our dynamic, and this is probably 2-3 weeks into us traveling together, being together, at that point in our dynamic, I was just so, I would get so agitated by her hot cold nature, and just feel really dismissed in my needs, would feel really upset that she wasn't acknowledging that we were essentially in a relationship, and but it wasn't progressing in this way where like she was admitting that to me, that she wanted me, that she really appreciated me. I think the most that she gave me is that she told me she was intrigued by me, and that was the night that we could have slept together. But then after that, the door never opened again. And then when she got the van, I had this big realization, and thank God I was still actually in this counseling program. I was actually in the second year of it. So that was something that was actually still anchoring me into a routine. It would happen once a month on a weekend. And thank God that was coming up, and the weekend to that was coming up. While I was in Portland, the weekend was coming, and I knew it. And I also was like, I need to part ways with this girl. Like, I am involved in a very unhealthy dynamic where I'm just like, I'm feeling strung along, and she's not turning towards me. She's not giving me what I want, even though I'm feeling really deep relationship feelings with her. She's not giving it to me. And so I had to tell her, I was like, tomorrow morning I had to tell her the next morning that I have to go. I have to go back down to the Bay. And it was a really abrupt, it was really, she had a lot of challenge with it, even though I think she was trying to let go gracefully, but she was like, why are you leaving? And I told her straight up, I was like, look, like, I'm wanting more out of this, but you're not giving it to me, and you're not interested. And she's like, I know, I don't know why. I'm just not interested in you in that way. And I was like, yeah, I gotta go then. And then I remember took like a whole day to kind of separate from her, and kind of preparing ourselves for it, because she was deeply attached to me. Like, she really appreciated me, and she was vocal about, like, I'm really gonna miss you. But at that point I knew, I was like, but this is not working for me. I can't do this. And she let me go. She was able to let me go. That drive back down to Oakland from Portland was the biggest, deepest grief that I had ever gone through. 15-hour drive, left at 5 p.m. and got back to Oakland around like 3 a.m. And I remember landing in Oakland, getting into my studio, and just feeling completely destroyed and like ravaged energetically. Like I had just kind of landed from another planet where I was completely someone else, and like I had put my identity aside for this person, and had like wide open energy chakra for her, and had no sense of boundaries, had no sense of myself really. And it was like I just let, in that whole experience, I had like just let myself fully surrender into her energy, in hopes that it would turn into us being together, even though before all this happened and throughout all of this, I knew she wasn't the type of person I wanted to be with. But there was an energy there that I just chose to fully go into. And so arriving back to Oakland, there was a long period where I just, I went so deep into this period of grief and this period of longing for her. We were still in touch. She would call me, and I would be surprised anytime she would call me and like want to stay connected and want to check in. And there was talk of her passing through the bay again, and we would see each other again. And and I remember every time we talked, it was like I was going through such this deep grief, emotive experience, and also at the same time feeling like I could not talk to her about it. Like I could not include her in what was actually going on for me because she wasn't interested in knowing me on that level. And so I remember talking to her and just feeling really weird and just feeling like, I can't like, it's like I can't even go there with her anymore, like pretend like everything is okay. So eventually I ended up having to put up a boundary with her and tell her like, look, I can't see you when you come to the bay because I'm going through so much pain around this connection. And I'm deeply confused because I want her back, and I know that it's for the best that she moves on or something. But I just know in myself I can't be casual in this situation and just like a friend in this situation. It's affected me so profoundly. So and I remember I just made a choice to, I was writing these songs at the time. I was writing these songs, and it was starting to come through to me that like I needed to put her into these songs, and I fully kind of let myself surrender to writing a heartbreak album, writing a breakup album. And I remember kind of in my ego, I wouldn't really let myself go there because there was something to like, it was almost like I was admitting to a defeat that she had affected me so deeply. But I had to. And I knew a part of my healing process is that I needed to go deeply into my creative process and use this experience as a muse. And so that's where this song, Only If You Wanted Me, kind of really came on for me. It's all about her. It's all about the kind of experience with her.
All day long, baby, all day long, everything seems to whisper a painful song. I get stuck in your mystery. What the fuck is up with you, and what did it mean to have you so close next to me, only to grab for something that could never be? I fall so hard for a fantasy, hoping and praying for it to be reality. Only if you wanted me.
In our dance, I took my heart out for you to see, but you held your stance. You looked at the thing with no intrigue. Because my hope, I keep smashing my heart against cold stone, and I can't cope. It takes everything in me to keep from picking up the phone. And after all, I saw your broken heart in a hotel room. That's what had me fall. That's why I kissed your chest and cared for your wound. To no avail. The wound is too deep. You just can't be free. You protect yourself with apathy. So that's really just like, that kind of encapsulates the whole dynamic that I had with her. a part of the Smashing My Heart Against Cold Stone, there some of what was in that was actually that woman that I was seeing in that counseling program too, who was older than me, who was a teacher in the program, who had that power dynamic over me. Because there was just a coldness to her. There was a coldness to this girl as well, even though there was a mixture of a lot of sweetness too, because there was real. I've always been the type of lover, the type of person that just sees the other so deeply and understands them so deeply and kind of feels them on such a energetic level and kind of intuitive level where I really get their pain and I really have compassion for it. And the whole I saw your broken heart in a hotel room. That's what had me fall. That's why I kissed your chest and cared for your wound. I remember, with her, we were hanging out in a lot of hotel rooms, and I did see her vulnerably in those moments, and I remember cuddling with her and kissing her chest, kind of like the attempt to open her heart, and it didn't work. I think it did probably to some level, but I don't think she was ready to admit it. And, she was, there was an energy of apathy with her, She kind of went through life a bit checked out, and I could see that the whole time. She was kind of gaslighting herself, and she was gaslighting me and the emotions that were going on between us, and she was trying to be unattached, even though we were deeply attached to each other. And that, for me, was just a painful experience.
You protect yourself with apathy, and all day long, baby, all day
So this is probably going to be the longest episode I've ever done, just to tell this story. But that is what it is. I guess I just want to wrap it up with what I learned from this situation. So I've vulnerably talked about in other episodes the pattern of the unrequited lover inside of me, and how it's been a confusing pattern for me, and this is probably the first time that it really kind of shone through as like, oh, this is something I struggle with. And I've recently actually gone through similar patterns of kind of getting caught up on a couple women that weren't available, and remembering back to this time with this girl, and just how devastating and how leveling it was for me, and comparing it to now, to where I'm at now. My boundaries are much more defined. Now I'm very good at kind of taking care of myself if it's someone that's confused, a woman that's confused, that like is intrigued by me but doesn't really want to give themselves to me. Now I really know how to handle my triggers around that, because for me it's all stemming from trauma and from my experience of being emotionally neglected when I was young. And I've been learning actually a lot about complex trauma, which is complex trauma is a bit more complicated because apparently it doesn't stem from one definitive experience that you were traumatized by. Rather, it stems from a conglomeration of systematic experiences of emotional neglect. And it's not like you can pin it on one experience or situation, but it's rather something that comes about just in honestly bad parenting, and the kind of parenting to where there wasn't enough important intention on a child. So I came from a past of that, and there is something to get for me getting caught up with someone who's not available to give me the love that I need, that I require, that I deserve. So hence these patterns of getting caught up with these women that couldn't give me what I want, and having to deal with my own traumatic responses inside, my own triggers, the spirals of shame, spirals of deep low self-esteem, and like patterns of giving myself over, giving my identity over to a glimpse of love from someone that just, is not actually interested in loving me. So anyways, what I've learned is resiliency through all of this. I've learned how to take care of myself a lot better. And I've also learned that I can tolerate emotions inside and recover, emotions that when I was younger, they were too scary. They were too big to deal with. I had to just check out. I had to dissociate into my creative world. So that's the big learning. It's been the refinement of protecting myself, the refinement of removing my energy away from women that can kind of be a trance-inducing or a vortex pulling me in, but learned how to say no to that. So that is the song. That is what is behind the song, Only If You Wanted Me. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It is a long one, and hopefully you made it through. If you did, I thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Only if you wanted me. Only if you wanted me. Only if you wanted me.